Hello and welcome to the Byline podcast from the Byline Times. The Byline Times, it's what the papers don't say, what radio doesn't report and what telly doesn't tell you. This time, the Biden question with Bonnie Greer. The question is, of course, whether he should stay as the Democratic presidential candidate or go, leaving the way open for Kamala Harris to stand for the White House. Several senior Democrats have suggested he should step down following a stumbling appearance on a recent TV head-to-head with Donald Trump. But Biden himself insists that he's the man for the job and is carrying on. Is that the right decision? I caught up with US-born playwright and commentator Bonnie Greer, who now lives in the UK, at the Byline Festival at Dartington Hall in Devon. I asked her first to sum up the state of American politics.
Well, in a sense, what's happening is semi-inevitable. And if we go all the way back to the Reagan presidency, which is one reason I left the United States, because I thought a second term of Ronald Reagan will not fly for me. The Republican Party, well, I think since Nixon, about 1969, gradually began to be taken over by forces. Some of it was Southern Democrats called the Dixiecrats, which was partly Nixon's strategy. He called it the Southern strategy. So those people who couldn't deal with integration, they couldn't deal with any of that, migrated from the Democratic Party into the Republican Party. There are also forces that have to do with just plain, straight out, naked capitalism. And there are also what I suppose you would call the Federalists, the Constitutionalists, people who see the Constitution as sort of a document handed down from God and therefore shouldn't be tampered with. A few organizations, of course, have advised Trump. I mean, Trump is the glove puppet of several right-wing organizations who've been waiting for somebody like this to come along. All Trump cares about is being the president, telling everybody what to do. So it's great for them because then they can use their influence to actually shape a thing called the Trump presidency, which is air, but it's awful air. And it doesn't have any foundation. It's just an accumulation of all of these kind of things. So right now, because we have an age of social media where people can talk more, it becomes the battle of the voices. So that when you get Biden on TV, stumbling, bumbling, looking tired, looking at all these things, you have three tropes going on there. First of all, one of the biggest prejudices is going on right now is ageism. I mean, somehow, when you reach a certain age, you're supposed to be, by definition, deteriorating. It's partly what people have always felt, but now we can talk about it. And then secondly, one of the tropes is the fact that there's a myth that Donald Trump actually had a great presidency. But of course, this is a post-pandemic response. We still haven't gotten over COVID and what happened to us during lockdown, what happened to us psychologically, what happened to us emotionally. And when we look back at the Trump presidency, which was a catastrophe, I mean, Trump stood up on stage once and told people to drink bleach that would help him, but nobody remembers that. All they remember is that somehow the jobs were better. No, they weren't. Somehow it was better. But how could it be better when over 1 million people died in the United States? Yet these forces are able to use Trump as a kind of mouthpiece in which people can see an America that didn't exist. And that's the dangerous part.
You know, Bonnie, at a personal level, I would be as militant against ageism as you obviously are. I do think it's a hideous feature of our age, but I think we also have to be honest and acknowledge that Joe Biden, certainly in one of the televised head-to-heads against Donald Trump, performed poorly. And in the real world, that may well have an influence on voters. Do you think that Biden honestly should continue in this race?
You hit on the word. It's called perform. I didn't look at the whole thing because I saw it at the beginning. I thought, oh my God, And then I started to analyze why I said that. Partly it's because we all know that, of course, the president is not one person. The president is many persons. He doesn't have the nuclear button on his desk and he decides to do what he does. Okay, we all know that. except when it looks like an old guy is exhibiting signs of aging, suddenly we get very nervous and think, oh my God, this guy's in charge of nuclear. But no, he's not. No, he's not. None of this is true. But it feeds into our own and natural feelings about seeing a man who obviously is affected by aging. And I think it was one of Obama's senior advisors, David Axelrod, who said, look, I went into a job with a guy who was in his 40s who had black hair and who was fantastic. By the time his second term was over, he had gray hair, and it gets you. It's a wearing job. So we would have those normal reactions to it, but the other part of it is Joe Biden doesn't do this by himself. And we know that's true because Trump did not have a presidency in which he was alone. His people working him were transparent. But it's a human thing. It's human that we would respond that way. It's human that we would panic. It's human that the Democrats are running around screaming about, oh my God, we've got to get somebody else. But that's not how the job works. He's the front man.
I get that. But nevertheless, the perception is out there. So I'm putting you on the spot. Do you think Biden should continue, or should he step down and make way for Kamala Harris, say?
Well, I think Biden was always going to make way for Kamala Harris anyway. I always thought that it was midterm, he would step down, and then the nation would have the first African-American black woman president, which is the existential nightmare of a lot of people on the right and the left, to be honest with you. That was always the plan. But Joe has to be there in order for that to happen. And I guess I'm saying that I didn't look at the whole interview because I thought, oh my God, what's happening with Biden? And I was nervous. I was scared. I was frightened. I turned it off. I didn't want to hear the commentary. I just thought this is catastrophic. And then I thought to myself, why do you think it's catastrophic? Because he's on TV and we can see that he's obviously out of it. He's shaking. Is that what I'm scared about? And I thought, yeah. And then why am I scared about it? Well, because he's president of the United States. Do you think he does this job alone? Well, no. However, it doesn't look good. Who doesn't it look good to? Well, it doesn't look, so it's this whole catalog of the way we see leaders and we see leadership and male leadership. Guys are out front. There's one guy. All of this is in business. It's the same thing. So Trump plays on this trope that he's the man who can control everything. Of course, Trump never read papers. He never read the state papers. He didn't know what was going on. He didn't need to know what was going on because he had people taking care of him. I'm only saying this because I've calmed down after my own initial freak out of everything. Biden has been in public life when Nixon was president, longer than most people in the United States have been alive. He knows how bad it was. He knows how bad it was. He also knows what the stakes are. He also knows that if we are going to judge the president of the United States on a television performance, and that's what it was, television is performative. So we're going to judge the president of the United States that way, which is how Trump became the president. If we're going to go down that road, we're in a lot of trouble, and we might be in a lot of trouble.
You're a deep-thinking, intelligent woman. I'm just wondering about, and I don't mean to be disrespectful.
No, say what you need to say.
No, the average American voter, even if they may be predisposed to vote for the Democrats, might just look at that. They won't think about it in the level of detail that you're deconstructing it with. They might just say, the guy's too old. I'm out of here. I'm not going to vote for him. I can't vote for him. You know that's a realistic scenario.
Exactly. Then what's the alternative to that? See, that's what's fascinating to me. Like I said, I turned it off. I had never seen the whole thing. Being in the theater, I looked at this and I thought, so it went off. I felt the same way I did the night Trump won the election. I remember vividly, I literally turned my face to the wall. I couldn't look at this man. I couldn't look in 2016 at what America had done. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that America had elected this obvious shyster, as a great Yiddish word. I couldn't believe it, but America did. And they did it because of what he did on television. And now here we are again with this man, Joe Biden, who, yeah, he's aged. Yeah, he's old. He looks older even than what he is. It was horrible. It was almost staged. It was so crazy. But what happened was we were crowding in on Joe's horrible performance, and we didn't fact check the 18 lies Donald Trump said on the stage. Now, okay, maybe that's human that we didn't do it, but Donald Trump was lying. The moderators didn't check him either because they were so aghast and shaken up. They obviously were there for Biden. They suddenly saw this. They didn't even look at Donald Trump. And Donald Trump was just lying his head off. Nobody's talked about what Trump said. Nobody talked about the things he said. They were all looking at Joe Biden and this really frightening performance, and it was a performance. You know, we're being human beings. We're human beings, and we're looking at what we see and we're looking at what we feel. That's human. The President of the United States takes the oath of allegiance. The President of the United States makes an address to Congress. The President of the United States decides that there's going to be a war. That's what is presented to us from the Oval Office. That's what we look at. But that is not the presidency of the United States. So I don't know. Maybe we need to grow up a little bit, but I doubt if we're going to do it.
Here at the Byline Festival, I spoke to Jay Rosen, Professor of Journalism at New York University, who spoke in pretty apocalyptic tones about the prospect of a second term for Trump. Talked about him in terms of authoritarianism.
Absolutely.
Fascism.
Absolutely.
And a threat to the democracy that we have known.
A threat to the world. The United States is just a launch pad. There was a great logician, Gödel, I forgot his first name, great thinker. And he fled Nazi Germany. He lived in Vienna. And Hitler eventually took over Austria, the Anschluss, and eventually took over, Vienna. And Vienna was the home of great minds, Einstein, all of these people. It's just the minds that made the 20th century were in Vienna. And he fled Vienna. Great thinker, Klaus Gödel. And so he became finally an American citizen. And of course, you have to go and take the oath of allegiance. And the judge will ask you questions about the Constitution. And one of his supporters was Einstein, his friend. And so they were outside, the legend has it, in the anteroom of this thing. And Gödel turns to Einstein and he said, "There's a flaw in the Constitution." I said, "So what are you talking about?" He said, "I'm from Vienna. I lived in Vienna. You lived in Vienna. Austria fell because there was a flaw. It can happen here." And he said, "I'm going to tell the judge. I'm going to tell him there's a flaw in the Constitution." And Einstein said, "Shut up and take the oath." All right. And he took the oath. And the flaw in the Constitution, I forgot the amendment, and this is what the Professor Rosen is saying. Yes, we cannot amend the Constitution without having a meeting of the states because the states are sovereign, which is how the abortion ruling went back to the states because the states created the United States. So the states have to ratify or change the Constitution. That's in the Constitution. What the Constitution doesn't tell you is how that is done. That's where Trump can come in. And he can decide how the Constitution is ratified. He can determine how the assembly is made. He can make it so that only certain people can assemble, as he now has been allowed by the Supreme Court of the United States, saying that the president has immunity. The Supreme Court has said that the president can actually put up fake electors as a presidential act, and that's part of what it is. And Trump might be able to do that under the Constitution of the United States and remake the Constitution. There isn't any way to stop him. And now that he's got this immunity, he can do it. So I think that's what Professor Rosen is saying. We can't have a guy like that in charge of anything. We can't have that kind of person. And Trump has already said, I'm going to take retribution. I'm going to go after my enemies. He tells you everything he's going to do. So he does have the mechanisms in the American Constitution to do that. And people can sit there and go, oh, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Well, he already has done things that we didn't believe he could do, and he can do it again.
You say that he represents a threat to the world. Why?
The President of the United States is the most powerful person on earth de facto. The President of the United States is commander-in-chief of the most powerful military on earth. Even though Russia has a bigger nuclear arsenal than the United States is the power. So if you think about the Roman Empire and you think about the emperors of Rome in their heyday had the power to actually remake the world, and they did. The President of the United States can do that. The President of the United States can make the decision that the United States of America withdraws from the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. That is an executive decision. The President can do that. The President of the United States can actually go and undo treaties. It might be difficult to do it by executive order, but if he has a Senate, which he might have, he can take it there and it can get done. So the President of the United States can do all these things. And if America decides that it's going to sidle up to Putin, to Xi Jinping, to these people, then the world shifts.
And do you think he will do that?
Of course, because he loves these people. He has no idea what their politics is. They're just big, powerful guys, and he likes it. And he has said that he loves them because they're powerful. And he's openly about it. He doesn't pretend. He loves these guys because they're dictators. And he said, I'll be a dictator on day one, which means he's going to do everything he wants to do. He's going to nullify things because he's executive privilege, he's executive power. He can pull the United States out of NATO. It's a treaty, but he can get us out of it. He can decide that he's going to withdraw any kind of connection with Ukraine and even encourage Russia to take over Ukraine, help Russia to do it. He loves Putin. That's wonderful. Putin can do anything he wants. That's what Trump wants to do. That's what we've given the President of the United States. He can go to the Senate, if he has a Senate in his control, and declare war on whoever he wants. He can seal the border at Canada. He can seal it at Mexico. He can seal it anywhere he wants because he has that executive privilege. He can undo law because he has the executive privilege. If he also, his party is in control of both houses, particularly the Senate, he can undo treaties. If his party is in control of the House of Representatives, which allocates money to the states and also is the adjudicator of a lot of laws, he can just undo stuff in a minute. He can undo the Civil Rights Acts. He can undo all of that. He had the power because he's the stooge of organizations like the Heritage Foundation. He doesn't read anything. He just signs. They gave him a short list of people for the Supreme Court. So now we've got a 6-3 majority on the Supreme Court, and these are appointments for life. You put a 45 or 50-year-old in the Supreme Court, they're in there for at least 35, 40 years. And the rulings of the United States, the whole thing changes so that I have more rights in my 20s than a woman now has it. A right has been taken from an American citizen. This has never happened before. So all of this is what is at stake with Donald Trump and more.
To finish, Bonnie, can you give us any words of positivity, any words of encouragement, anything that says that this pretty dismal scenario that you've painted can be avoided?
I always think that things can be avoided. I think Joe Biden is right to stay in place as a principle. They can't have a contested convention. That's just chaos. They can't do that. I think Americans, to a certain extent, Joe Biden's infirm state is a chance for us to grow up. It's a chance for us to realize that the president has immense power, but the president of the United States is a team effort. Yeah, it's horrible looking. It's scary. You want the chief executive of the United States, the most powerful person on earth, to look like a Superman. But look what the office does to people. Look at what it did to Obama. Look what it did to all of them, really. Ronald Reagan, we don't know what state Ronald Reagan left the presidency because people weren't that open in those days. But there were all kinds of rumors about Reagan, who was operating under, well, he died with dementia. We don't know when that set in. We don't know when that happened because things weren't that open. But the United States continued. So I'm not saying that people shouldn't be concerned for him as a person as well. He's trying to hold this fort together. But I think it's a time when history is asking America, as it asked America at the Civil War, as it asked America at the beginning of the Civil Rights Movement, as it asked America in the midst of the Depression when people thought it was all done, it's saying, America, grow up a little bit. Just grow up a little bit and look and see that it is possible to take your destiny in your hands and make the country that you want. And you have a president, and this president can guide you, but it's about you, and you can do it. And America survived. But we are now in an age where we have a lot of life online. We have a lot of conversation with each other. We have a lot of interaction. And so I don't know if the country has the emotional or moral stamina to look at itself and say, we're more than just a person in the Oval Office. We are more than that.
Bonnie Greer recorded at the Byline Festival, and you can watch that interview and others with the likes of Sangeeta Maiska, Lord Victor Adebowale and many more over at Byline TV on YouTube. This has been a Byline audio production. Do head over to bylineaudio.com where you can listen to more podcasts such as Adventures in Americana with Bonnie Greer and Byline Times editor Hardeep Matharu, plus the myth-busting and utterly hilarious Utter Bollocks featuring Otto English and John Mitchinson. They are free to stream, but you can enjoy extra content by signing up for a small fee to our premium service. This episode was produced by Phil Driscoll and me, Adrian Goldberg. We'll see you again very soon. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Byline